Tiffany joined us.
All right, just getting set up here, everyone.
Wayne Dobbins joined us.
We're rolling here with Dan in about 30 seconds or so. If you can see, we're hanging out by the beach. There might be a little bit of unaccounted for noises, so bear with us as we get rolling.
You should move your mic on the other side because it's like.
Love to hear if everyone hears us. Does everyone hear us all right? Can we give it a thumbs up or a wave or a yes or something like that? Can we do that? Everyone hear us?
4 people on.
Are we good? Cool.
Dan, you've got to come in toward closer to see. Yeah.
Yep.
Let's show them the setup.
Huh? All right, Kate, my wife, is going to give us a little bit of a view. If you're watching on LinkedIn and Facebook, you don't see this, but if you're on IG, just giving you a little bit of a
We're in Barbados.
The background. Yeah, we are coming to you live from Copacabana, Carlisle Bay Beach. Is that right? Carlisle Bay
Yep.
Beach here in beautiful Barbados, near Bridgetown, Barbados. And of course, Sandy McKay here with you. We got Dan Merriam here, Dan the Island Man.
Dan the Island Man.
And we're going to be talking about investing overseas and doing some fun stuff internationally. How you can go about doing that and, building up your wealth, building up your freedom, and taking advantage of some of the cool different opportunities that are there today. So we've got maybe 45 minutes or so here. We're going to hang out with you all. I'd love to get your questions. If you've been dying to come on this and you already have questions, then let us know. Throw them in the chat because we want to make sure we get to all of your questions in that time and make the best use of everything here with you. We've got our own. I got a few for Dan for sure that we're going to work through anyways. But yeah, please comment. Let us know what you're thinking as you go about this. Hit up that chat box and let us know what your questions are. I think we're going to start off maybe just a quick round of intros. I know some of you may know me if you're watching on my social media account. I'm sure you do. You might not know Dan. You might. But we want to know a little bit more about you. That's for sure, Dan. Why don't we just kick it off with that? Let's talk about a bit about your background and why the heck we're here in Barbados talking about this.
Sure. Dan Merriam here. Real estate investor. I actually met Sandy not a decade ago, but maybe 6 or 7 years ago in Hamilton. We just kept running into each other at nasty properties, and it happened 10 or 12 times. Eventually exchanged cards, and the rest is history. And been working together ever since. So, but yeah, I'm a real estate investor, entrepreneur. I'm also the founder of Offshore Freedom, and we help successful investors and entrepreneurs who want to live and invest in the Caribbean.
Nice. And Dan's got a lot of track record in Canada, Southern Ontario, a lot in Hamilton that we've helped him with and done some deals together with. And yeah, if you don't know me, Sandy McKay here. I've been touring around Barbados a little bit lately and Antigua and kind of following Dan and learning from him of what he's been up to and looking for different opportunities. As you know, there's lots of limitations in a way in Canada. There's lots of things that are amazing, but there's a few limitations that we've run into over time and some ways to maybe get around that. So we're going to talk about that today. And if you're watching, we'd love for you to share this too. Share this with someone else. Share this with a friend, family member, whoever else you might think would get some value out of this. And again, hit up the chat box there. Let us know what your questions are because we want to make sure you get everything that you want out of this here today. Let's talk about why you end up coming into Caribbean in the first place and what led to that, pulling the trigger on that and actually doing something about it. A lot of people have that dream, right?
Yep.
Sitting on a beach, maybe sitting somewhere behind us right now and just retiring or living an easier life, I suppose. That's kind of the dream. But what was that what it was for you, or why did you come this way?
It's really a combination of things. I remember even as a kid, I always loved maps. I always loved looking at places in the world and just always dreamt of traveling. And then eventually it led to, having the dream of owning a villa somewhere warm, somewhere on a beach or on the water that I could have friends and family visit. And I was reading an investing book that talked about this. And that was really my purpose for investing, was kind of build some wealth to get to that point. And yeah, the idea of just hanging out with friends and family and escaping Canadian winters was what really drove me to invest in Hamilton. And maybe 5 years ago, it started being a reality. So started looking online, started in Miami, and that led me to look in Asia, even places in Europe, and I kept coming back to the Caribbean. So um, I would say the other powerful experience I had was in 2017. I took off about 4.5 months and went to Asia. I had a cousin living in Malaysia at the time. He had an e-commerce business, was just killing it, and had this beautiful villa right outside of Kuala Lumpur that was just like amazing. So he invited me to stay there for a month, and I was talking to him, and I actually found out that he had left Canada, become a resident of Malaysia through their MM2H program, and basically set himself up tax free. And the whole concept of that was intriguing. I wasn't even close at that point to leaving Canada or relocating, but it kind of sent me down a rabbit hole, right, to learn about different citizenship and residence by investment programs. Learn more about Canadian tax, learn more about international tax and offshore structures. So I started following a lot of people on YouTube. Andrew Henderson's a big one. Nomad Capitalist. He's probably the leader in this space right now. And so yeah, that led me to a lot of research, and I kept coming back to the Caribbean. Maybe it's because I love James Bond movies. The Caribbean's just kind of a sexy place, and I just saw it as undervalued and underappreciated, and I still see that now. So, and I know you agree, Sandy.
I think you got a knack for that. I think I've learned over the years about you is you got a bit of a knack for sniffing that sort of stuff out. Undervalued opportunities. I think you've done that well. And I mean, I don't know exactly what your mindset was when you came to Hamilton, but for myself, it was a little bit of that. It was undervalued, and it was just so obvious, and it's exploded in the last 10 years, right? And so I think so many different variables with this right now in the world, but there's a lot of that kind of same sort of smells the same in Caribbean, right? In a way.
Yeah, I'd buy properties in Canada, and people would say, "What the hell did you buy that piece of hunk of junk for? And what did you pay for it?" And they just wouldn't understand. But I'd see this vision there, and I know Sandy and Kate have done a lot of projects like that in Hamilton, where people said, what are you buying this thing for? Yeah. Especially 10 years ago, before Hamilton kind of came into its own. So I see a ton of opportunities in the Caribbean like that now, and I still love the market in Canada. I think it's a great place to invest, but I don't see it doubling, tripling over the next 5 years. And that's what I like about the Caribbean. I think certain jurisdictions, certain neighborhoods, certain categories of properties have the potential to appreciate quickly. And there's also some great cash flow, which ties into, the whole BRRRR model and, growing portfolios quickly. I think there's actually an opportunity to do that down here. And there wasn't 10 years ago.
Financing being a big part of that, probably. Yep. Right. That it's not overly easy yet. But some of the countries like in Barbados here, we're driving around, you see Scotiabank, RBC, CIBC, BMO too, maybe? BMO as well?
Not BMO.
Those three for sure.
There's a few British banks, and even some of the local banks here are just more established. They have a stronger appetite for lending here. So yeah, Barbados is a great example of a market that financing is possible even for foreigners.
Well, that's and more, it's more apparent than ever that Canadian banking is actually kind of a good thing. All these regulations and annoyances maybe that some Canadians might feel with them.
Yeah.
They're pretty safe.
Yeah.
And so I think having that structure here in some of these countries, Barbados for sure, gives you a bit of that comfort, right? It gives you a bit of that safety of your money is not just, there's some challenges perhaps to get it in and out of the countries at times, but it's not going into, a wild west of financing where you don't really know what your money's going to do. Even the U.S. is at this point kind of a wild west right now.
Last couple of weeks have been a bit of a roller coaster. It's so true, and people take that for granted in Canada, even with credit unions, right? That their money's safe. Down here, banks fail, right? And there's been, we won't go down that rabbit hole, but I've heard stories of people losing $5 million because the bank just folds and they have their money in there and just gone. But yeah, certain islands have that safety of Canadian banks or just established banks, like Republic Bank in Trinidad's actually considered very established, and there's a few other banks throughout the Caribbean. But It's it's way better than a lot of the Spanish speaking countries in Central America or South America. So that's a big opportunity. And maybe a good segue into that is even the legal system in the former British and British territories down here is very similar to Canada, even more similar to Canada than the United States. It's British common law. If you buy property, you close on the property, you get title transfer, you're pretty much protected. And from what I've heard, that's just not the case in, let's say, some of the Spanish-speaking countries where they have a different legal system. So I think that gives investors confidence, and even just someone looking to buy a villa or a vacation home. It's a good place to do that. It's a good place to buy, heirloom quality property to keep in the family for generations.
Why would you do it here over places in the U.S. that are also kind of appealing right now? Florida probably being number one for Canadians, at least. There's all sorts of things. Hawaii, California, Arizona, these types of markets that you're getting a bit of that escape from the winter. But you're in the U.S. Have you explored much on that side of it, or how that compares to a Caribbean per se?
Yeah, I've traveled a lot in the U.S. and there's great investment opportunities everywhere, and there's even great opportunities to vacation, right? In a lot of different places. I love spending time in Europe. I love Asia. I don't spend a lot of time in the U.S., but there's things I really like about the U.S. You got to just figure out what vibes with you, and I really like places like Barbados. A lot of Canadians, a lot of British, very laid back. It's people are just chill. Antigua's chill
It's
on
really
an even.
safe. It's a really safe
It's
feeling
really
island.
safe.
Some people are worried about that, and probably more so some of the Spanish speaking ones.
Someone says Deep V Adrian Pinozo approved.
What's that, sorry?
They like the
Justin
deep V.
Sweet.
Oh, Deep V.
Yeah.
Adrian Pinozo approved. Nice. The Barbados is really chill. You got to go with vibes with you. And I live in Antigua, and I love it because it's just uber laid back. It's not the easiest island to get things done, but if you want to go down and chill with your family, no one bothers you. There's beautiful beaches. It's not that busy. It's not that congested compared to, Florida. It's a whole other world, right?
We're about as busy as we get here right now, actually.
Yeah,
This
no,
is about
exactly.
as busy as a beach that you could
Let's
find here
show
in
them.
Barbados.
Yeah, and it's
It'll do a little. Let's see if I can get this show a little over our heads here a bit. It's about as busy. I mean, all those umbrellas are not really accounted for either. They're pretty much, for the most part, empty.
Yeah.
We got one question here, Paul. Thanks for asking. Certain markets in the Caribbean, and we were just talking about this a little bit, so I figured we'd touch on it. Financing where you're able to burr a project and challenges with that, because it's really the financing side that's the challenge with that, right? Or the refinance, because in Canada, of course, we've done this for a lot of years. You buy a house at $500,000, let's say, you put in $200,000, you're into it for $700,000, but now you go to the bank and say, hey, now I'm worth $1 million, let's say. I'm trying to do the math in my head as we go. It's worth $1 million now. I'm gonna get 80% of that out, so I'm gonna get $800,000 out. I'm only into it for $7 million, so I'm actually, in that example, I'm actually making even $100,000 and pulling all my money out.
Mm-hmm.
We know that's really easy because the bank's very, very systematized and very relatively easy to make that happen. Not exactly that here, right? But
Yeah.
What would be a version of doing that because you've sort of done this in Antigua, or at least down this path. How does that work there? Slower.
It's slower. Let's start there. So in Canada, you can buy a property, close on it, renovate it in, let's say, 6 to 12 months, and have funding waiting right at the end of that reno. Here, it's more like a 2 or 3 year time frame to get that done. I've talked to a lot of bank managers about this. I've talked to a lot of people who have also done this, and it really depends on the island. Some islands. Well, first of all, some islands and some banks don't actually lend to foreigners. So talk to someone who knows what they're doing. They won't always tell you that up front, but push comes to shove.
Who's they? Realtors?
The
or
banks.
The banks?
Well, realtors won't tell you that up front. From my experience, they'll tell you yes.
I'm sure we got a lot of realtors here. The level of realtor, the quality of realtor down here in general, almost anywhere actually outside North America, in markets that aren't fully developed, let's say, for sure, a little bit lower quality.
Depends on your definition of quality, right? Yeah. Like, they know how to close.
Yeah.
They know how to get deals done, But no, it's a lot of markets aren't regulated. Barbados is more regulated than most, but like Antigua doesn't have a
That's
real
really
estate
what it comes down to.
association.
It's the ones that aren't regulated that have some. Anyone can walk off the street and get their license for a couple $100.
And there's challenges
Or their
there.
license.
There's a lot of situations where people take deposits and disappear. Right, that's very common. I've even had experiences with that. So you do have to be careful. You do have to have your guard up. You need to work with someone who knows what they're doing on the ground, that's an expert, whether it's an agent, myself, a friend that's done this before. It's really helpful to find that advice, and especially island specific advice, because even between Antigua, Barbados, St. Lucia, and let's say Turks and Caicos, there's some huge differences there, right? And even different banks in different areas have different appetites for different types of properties. So yeah.
Awesome. Got a couple more questions there. Brian's asking about property management, which is another kind of, can be a little wild west from what I see down here. Although a lot of people are doing maybe a combo of that, realtor and property manager, or doubling up on some of these industries. What's your experience with that side of things?
Property management's hard to find in Hamilton, or at least it was 5 years ago, and now there's more reputable companies doing it. It's probably more difficult. You probably need to do more diligence. Depends on the scale of the project. If it's a large project, you might even want to do it yourself.
You're gonna pay a lot too, because you're a lot of these. You're talking about Airbnb or that type of short-term, short-term, medium-term rentals for the most part, right? Which is,
people want 20% for even medium-term rentals. Airbnb, there's some companies I've seen will take 30, 40% take. But the cash flow is still good. And if they do a great job and they keep your ratings high, maybe it's worth it. But no, there's no question that property management is not as developed as Canada. A more developed market like Barbados or Cayman, for that matter, which we haven't even mentioned, there's a lot more options. But yeah, on a small island in a remote neighborhood, you need to be on the ground and find someone, or have someone on the ground that can actually source somebody.
Wayne is asking, what style of property is best recommended down there? Single, duplex, multi?
Singles or duplexes or multis? What are the ones you're just closing on some this week?
Yeah. So
those are singles, right?
I've been looking in a market in Antigua called Jolly Harbor for a long time. It's a marina community, a lot of villas right on the water. They all have their own boat slip. And most of them are single family, perfect for Airbnb rentals, turnkey, not a lot of maintenance on the property. It's a gated community.
Price point there, $300,000?
$3 to $5,
It's got amenities.
depending on location. Yeah, it's actually a bit run down. It's been mismanaged for the last 20 years, but was recently purchased by a group of Canadian investors who are actively going through the process to plan new buildings, plan new amenities, gentrify. So I've liked that, but we've been looking at a lot of hotels and motels, conversion projects down here, commercial buildings, multifamily properties. But to answer the question, I think there's the appetite for single family and duplex rentals here has exploded, especially in Barbados and some of the more developed islands in the last 3-4 years. But I still think there's great deals. I still think the price point's a lot less than you're going to see in like a hot area of Miami or a premium location like Palm Springs.
Well, the West Coast here in Barbados is even as it feels slightly expensive compared to, because you look around at other islands and stuff, you'll see a few $100,000 properties for a few $100,000, $500,000. You're getting up to $1 million. You're starting at $1 million actually on the West Coast here, but you're on the beach. You're not in Miami. You're starting at, I don't know, 5 for the same thing.
It's hard to compare, but yes, I see a ton of value here.
Yeah.
And I also see like some neighborhoods that are very expensive, and then 1 or 2 neighborhoods over are half the price or 30% of the value, which doesn't make sense. So yeah, I see these kind of pockets of opportunity here. Like Sandy Lane in Barbados is a fortune. You're not going to get something on the beach there for less than a few million.
Well, your neighbors with Rihanna, so
yeah,
that's worth it. That's worth
I think Bono's got a place there, and it's very high end. But Fitz Village, just south of there, Whole Town, those are neighborhoods that are still pretty affordable, and you're right there. Like you can you can walk to a lot of the nice restaurants on the beach there, or some of the different amenities there. So yeah, I love Barbados. There's a lot of great buys that I'm seeing.
But you didn't answer the question. Do you recommend single, duplex, or multi?
It's hard to be specific, right? And in Barbados, I think a lot of people buying that type of property are also coming down here with their family for a month. It's not just cash flow, it's also lifestyle. So if you want a single family home for that privacy, that's a good fit. If you're willing to live in a duplex and rent the other part out, or maybe you want that flexibility of opening up another side and accommodating some guests, it's kind of personal, really.
I'm just going to pop in and say I think it's important to mention that architecture here for duplexes and triplexes is way different than what it is back home in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of these, like for example, we went to see the triplex yesterday. It came with its own private pool, rooftop cabana, and a bar type of amenities, and 400 meters to the beach.
Yeah, so there's totally different types of inventory here for sure. I think one of the things that we've seen agree on is that there's that medium term market is quite intriguing here, because there's the short term stuff, which is great, but all the turnover on that is a bit of a pain in the ass to work with, just like it is in Canada. Everywhere it's a bit of a pain in the ass with that, as is long term, especially in not so landlord friendly places like Ontario. That medium term's got a nice, but you have to tailor your property to that, right? You have to know going in what your end user is going to be. Who's your avatar of that perfect tenant or vacationer, and what are they? What are they doing? Are they 20-year-olds coming here to party? Are they 40-year-olds bringing their family down to work and play? Are they digital nomad type places, type of people, right? So you have to know that going in. So every property you look at, you got to visualize.
You have to envision your end user.
Who's the end user?
Or end users. And make sure you check off all those boxes. If you're missing laundry, no one's going to want to stay there for 3 months and go to the local laundromat in Barbados. It's just not going to happen. But yeah, I totally agree, Sandy. The medium term market is undersupplied. There's a lot of short-term rentals. I also think medium term's a little bit more resilient, because during COVID, the hotel business just dried up. But there was still a lot of people looking to work remote for 2, 3, 4 months. I know during COVID, I was still traveling, but I would stay in a place for 2, 3 months, right? And so, yeah. But
well, there's lots of inventory for that too, which is a cool thing. There's lots of these. Like a Burr style of property, those smaller hotels
are still hurting,
or boutique style mom and pop hotel operations that just have given up, right? Because they had a virtually impossible 2 or 3 years, and most of the Caribbean at least was pretty closed off, right? So there's a lot of opportunities with those. I've seen we've explored a bunch of those here this past week, as well as when I was back here in December. We both explored a few of them. There's some incredible opportunities there.
Yep.
I like those for the multifamilies. Little variation of what a multifamily would be.
Yeah, a lot of families, a lot of young couples that would normally go to Sandals for a week are already thinking, let's go away somewhere for a month or two and work. Let's bring the grandparents, let's bring the kids. The kids can stay in school and work on their tablet. That's kind of the world we're moving into. So yeah, the medium term rental space is a great asset class.
Someone wants a request to be live on the thing.
We can get to in a sec. They want to ask a live question. There is one question here that I want to get to. What's the average loan to value for refinancing down here? And that's even for financing in general, right? What's the average loan to value? It's certainly not 20%. That's from what I've seen. What have you seen?
So, like in Canada, it's based on the appraised value in a place like Barbados or let's even say Antigua, and it also depends on if you're a foreigner or if you're a local or a citizen, which we can get into if we have time. Generally, 65% on a rental property is standard, but that doesn't mean that it can't be, let's say, 80 or 90% of your cost base, right? Just quick math. You buy a property for $1 million, you put 200 into it, and the bank values it at 1.5 million. you might get more than that 65 loan to value because the bank actually values it higher than your cost. So that's one way to get a higher loan to value. But yeah, 65% is standard. But actually, locals here buying principal residences or even rental properties can get, principal residence. I've seen 95% loan to value. There's even some 100% financing down here. But generally on a principal residence, it's 80% in a place like
VTBs
Barbados or Antigua.
are available.
They're not common, but they can be negotiated.
Yeah.
And especially on commercial property, motels, hotels are common. But there's opportunities to do that with land, more expensive villas. Sellers are generally not motivated by price, but motivated by terms, and aren't motivated to sell quickly because usually they don't have debt, but do want to get a deal done with the right buyer, right? And do want to sell the property. A lot of them have like a price in mind and are open to maybe some vendor financing to get a deal done. So yeah, I have seen that, Sandy. Yeah.
Yeah, the financing world down here is certainly interesting. That's why that's personally why I like a lot of the locations that have that Canadianized banking system, like including not just the system, but the actual banks.
Yeah.
Just makes things, it's a lot more comfortable probably, but also I just think it just seems smart to me long term.
Yep.
There's just too many variables that could ruin an opportunity in another country that system's not really there, including sometimes in the US.
Yeah.
I know we want to get into the taxes. I know people are waiting for that one. That's always an intriguing one. Do we have any more questions before we get to taxes? I know everyone eager for that. Any other questions? Shoot them in the chat box there. I'd love to see them. Brian's asking about monkeys. Other butlers, monkey butlers available. Yeah. I think that's
Brian.
A yes, maybe.
I don't know, but I don't know, Brian. You're gonna have to get back to us on that.
I've seen some. There's monkeys. I don't know if they're available to be butlerized. All right, let's go to why you picked Antigua. How did you pick Antigua versus some of these other? Because this is going to tie in with the taxes, I'm sure, a little bit.
For sure.
Why did you pick that market? What is it? What does that even mean? A lot of people hear, "Oh, you're going to Cayman or you're going to wherever to pay no taxes." Is that even a reality? Or who is that a reality for? If it is,
where do I start? I decided in 2020, after doing a lot of research, that I was going to leave Canada. And there were a lot of reasons for that. One, I like the idea of living somewhere warm. Two, I wanted to start investing internationally and grow my portfolio internationally. But yeah, tax was definitely a reason. As a Canadian, you can leave Canada, become a non-resident for tax purposes, set yourself up in a country that's more tax neutral or has lower taxes, and live there. It doesn't mean you have to spend 12 months there, but you do have to spend a certain amount of time there. You do have to sever your ties with Canada. So it's a very long process. And if anyone wants to learn more about it, they can reach out to me directly, and we can share that information later. But yeah, why Antigua?
You don't have to sever your ties with Canada. Or it depends on which country. Or what does that even mean? Sever your ties.
So I still visit Canada. I still have businesses in Canada. I still have properties in Canada. But personally, you can't have your own home. You can't have, cars in your personal name. You can't be a real estate agent in Canada and still be operating. You can't be part of an association in Canada like a realtors association. So personally, you do have to sever ties. It doesn't mean you can't spend any time there.
This is if you want to be a citizen in one of these other countries.
Well, this is if you want to be a non-resident of Canada for tax purposes, right? To be specific. It doesn't mean you can't spend time there. It doesn't mean you can't. You still get to keep your Canadian citizenship, but you're a non-resident of Canada, and you do need to become a resident somewhere else, right? And specifically a tax resident somewhere else. So. And there's actually a lot of programs all over the world. The Caribbean just happens to have a lot of them. And I think it's just a great region to live and invest. I think there's a lot of tailwind in the Caribbean. But a lot of the reason people move to Portugal is for tax, right? And they have a number of programs, including their Golden Visa program that's very popular. The Thai Elite Visa program is another very popular program where you can live, invest in Thailand, own property in Thailand. Malaysia is another popular option. But I chose Antigua because Antigua is one of the 5 islands in the Caribbean that has a citizenship by investment program. So you can actually buy a property or donate to a development fund in Antigua. Each island has, a different setup, but Antigua specifically, it's buy real estate, invest in a development fund, or invest in a business. Real estate's about 400,000. There's about 100,000 US donation to the development fund. I chose the donation route. You can also invest $1.5 million in a local business or real estate development. And if it's approved by the government, they'll issue you a passport in, let's say, 6 to 12 months, which I know isn't the advertised amount, but there's actually a big backlog of applications right now that they're sorting through, and there's some challenges there for the government because it's become more popular, especially in these last couple of years. There's a lot of uncertainty in the world right now. These programs used to attract primarily people from developing countries that had passports that didn't allow them to have great travel access. But you're starting to see more Canadians, British, Americans look for these citizenship programs, some of them as plan Bs. I know a lot of Americans are looking for a second citizenship just as a plan B if, shit hits the fan. I'm sure Canadians are thinking the same. For me, it was really more to establish myself in Antigua and in the Caribbean. Antigua is part of the CARICOM region. So now I have access to live and invest in other islands in the Caribbean, including Barbados, as part of having that passport. So yeah,
Barbados does not have the investment program, right?
You're right, Sandy, to be clear. But by having a passport in Antigua, it allows me to very easily live in Barbados. And there's even some advantages to setting up banking, setting up a corporate structure in the Caribbean. But just to finish off, being a citizen of Antigua makes it a lot easier to buy property, a lot easier to set up corporations and do business in Antigua. And I'm treated as a local, I guess, or I'm not treated as a foreigner anymore. And so the whole process of acquiring property, transferring title is just a lot easier and less expensive as well.
So there's lots to learn. Every country's slightly different, right? Every country's got their little nuances with that whole setup. But I think the reality, I think most people have it as a dream. It really doesn't make sense for a lot of people, actually. The no tax.
Yes.
No tax at all. Because you have to really get a little distance from Canada if you're Canadian.
Yeah.
There might, depending on what country you live in now, that might look different. But getting rid of your Canadian citizenship or anything like that also comes with a lot of risk.
Becoming, living no tax and staying in Canada is not really possible. Actually, Sandy knows a lot about Canadian tax, so he could probably speak to this. There's a lot of insurance strategies. There's a lot of, tax deferral strategies that a lot of real estate investors use. I know Sandy's used.
Insurance for sure is super underutilized.
Yeah.
Life insurance, to be clear. Insurance, whole life insurance policies. Anyways, we got lots of good contacts for that. If anyone's interested in how that looks, we could help out. I do a lot of that personally. Just makes a lot of sense to help mitigate that tax hit.
Yep.
You still pay taxes, but a little bit less with that strategy. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's okay. My goal was to leave Canada and live in a place that's pretty much tax neutral. Antigua does have some tax, like buying property in Antigua, you are taxed on rental income, but they have no capital gains tax. You're not taxed on dividends that are foreign sourced. Certain types of income in Canada, I can receive tax free as well. So it's a great place to set up. Barbados is actually a very popular place for Canadians because Barbados has a tax treaty with Canada, and with with a little more structuring, Barbados is actually a very low tax jurisdiction. So also something I'm happy to talk to people about if they want to reach out directly. I spent too much time doing research, and I look back, I spent 5 years going down this rabbit hole and learning about all of these different islands. And I probably should have just hired someone, but I like this stuff. I kind of geek out on this stuff. So, and I'm happy to share like what Offshore Freedom does for people is put together this holistic plan for them. If someone wants to leave Canada and relocate to the Caribbean, I can go through different islands, talk about the pros and cons, learn a little bit more about your business in Canada or the UK or another country, learn a little more about your family, and kind of give you some advice and 3 or 4 different plans at work. And some people just want to stay in Canada because they have ties there, they have a cottage, they have kids, they have family there, but want to spend more time down here. want to invest down here, want to diversify their, real estate or investment portfolio and get some exposure to the Caribbean because they see what I see, they see what we see down here. So, and that's something I can also help with and speak to in great detail.
You reminded me about the schooling too is a huge one, right? Like picking your place to set up anything like this. The schools, if you have kids, obviously, is extremely important.
Yep.
And a lot of like Barbados has a very, very high quality schooling system. Most of the Eastern Caribbean, I believe, from what I've seen, does. Not necessarily hit and miss, maybe here and there.
Hit and miss.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll leave it at that.
That's important, obviously. And some of them are tied in with Canada more than others. There's some private school options that are really good that are running even the same or similar curriculums as Canada.
Yeah.
So, families can live here 6 months, live there 6 months, and actually still have their kids have a somewhat typical upbringing in that sense, at least from like what they're learning. It wouldn't be too much difference there. So there's lots of versions of that too. Yeah. I want to make sure everyone knows we got maybe 10 minutes here left. Dan and I are burning up here, I think. I don't know about you.
Oh, I put my hat on. It's hot out here. What's the temperature in Hamilton, Ontario right now?
I'm sure it's probably not negative. It's probably zero.
No.
0? 5 degrees Celsius, something like that.
Yeah, no.
This thing is calling us behind here eventually. I don't know if you can see the ocean over the umbrellas, but we're gonna have to get there pretty soon. Throw your questions in the chat box, though. We want to get to them. Leave a comment. Give us a thumbs up if you're appreciating this info. If you want anything more here and we haven't got to it yet, let us know because we're gonna wrap up in about 10 or so minutes, and we're certainly happy to answer questions afterwards too if we don't get to them. But throw your questions in there. And we touched on Antigua. Why did you so Antigua specifically was the right fit for you? What are if you had to give it like 3 main bullet points as to why you chose there?
Yeah.
What was the reason?
Well, I had boxes that I wanted to check off. So for me, it was I travel a lot. I've been perpetually traveling since 2017, 2018. So I liked Antigua because it had direct flights from Toronto, a number of destinations in the United States and the UK. So I can kind of jump across the pond if I want. Other islands in the Caribbean are also connected. I like it was quiet. For me, the Caribbean is a place and get things done. And sure, when friends and family visit, I have some fun too. But for me, it's like my place of solitude. I wake up early and run. I eat healthy. I get a lot of work done. When I come back to Canada in the summer, I take time off. When I travel Europe, I usually take a bit of time off. So Antigua checked off that box. It was quiet. There weren't too many distractions. The beaches are unbelievable. The people are amazing. The island is crazy safe. I like the history. It's a really unique and really special place that if you haven't been to, you should absolutely come and visit. It's actually becoming a really hot tourist destination right now. It's always attracted tourism, but it's really trending. So, and then the last thing with Antigua, citizenship by investment. I like the idea of having a second passport. I'm a very proud Canadian. I love Canada. But yeah, I like the idea of having a second passport. I like the idea of having ties to the region. CARICOM is kind of like the European Union of the Caribbean. It ties in a whole bunch of islands together, including the British territories. And I wanted to be part of that, so that's why Antigua.
From a kind of diversification standpoint, I think there's some value in that. You
Yep.
just never know what's going to happen in these small islands of 100 grand, a few 100,000 people.
Mm-hmm.
You never really know what could happen, right? So having like if you're in Antigua and something happens there that's not good politically or whatever, probably easy enough for you to transition to some of these other options, right?
Oh, I'll take a boat to Montserrat. It's
right.
you can see it right over there. I'm looking to get even a third passport. I've also looked at residence programs in Asia. I like the idea of being mobile. Like everyone remembers the restrictions in Canada during the pandemic. They were brutal. I avoided 90% of them, other than having to quarantine like 7-8 times when I came back to Canada. Literally. I was in Bali for a lot of the pandemic. I was in the Caribbean. I was spending time in Antigua, and I like that freedom. And I'm certain that there's going to be something like that. Something like that will happen again in our lifetime, and I want to be prepared for that.
So aside from Antigua, or you can maybe Barbados is one of them. But what are some of what would be their top like 3 or 4 other islands or areas that it could be other parts of the world where you see something like this being a really good option for Canadians, especially.
I think for Canadians that want to buy a vacation home, spend time with their family in the Caribbean, whether it's a month or 3 months, have an Airbnb rental. Turks and Caicos is red hot right now and has been for a while. That's not news to anybody. Costa Rica is another very, very popular spot. I think Barbados is still undervalued. I think more and more Canadians should be looking at Barbados for personal and business reasons.
Reasons, there's lots of great people here that you can employ if you're setting up a business. We met with a guy there yesterday, 2 days ago. Yesterday, who is moving his whole team here from Canada. 250 employees.
No, not all of them.
They're not all coming here, but he's got 250 employees. They're all, some of them, and the core ones especially, are coming here to Barbados to work 6 months of the year, work in Canada 6 months of the year. He's hiring some local people as well, and there's really high quality, educated people and talent around some of these islands. Barbados for sure, and some of the others as well. So
Barbados is actually where I've picked. I have a small team here as well. It's I think the most educated island in the Eastern Caribbean, and people are hardworking. Things move a little faster than some of the smaller islands. But just to finish off, I see opportunity everywhere, and they're different. I actually really like the idea of investing in some of the less developed islands. I was just in Dominica a few days ago, and I see a huge opportunity for like land banking there. Buying 50 acres of land, working with a local family to develop that land over time. Maybe some of the land is sold freehold. Maybe some of it is a lease that the family kind of retains that ownership. So there's a lot of those kind of partnerships opportunities. St. Kitts and Nevis is another really cool island. It's not very populated. It's gorgeous. Flight access isn't great, but Nevis is becoming a pretty exclusive little spotlight now, almost like an island in the Bahamas. Or it's not like St. Bart's, but I think in the future it could have that kind of exclusivity. There's a Four Seasons there. I could keep going, but those are the ones that kind of immediately come to mind.
Should also mention maybe the school system, how the Tarek that we met, he's actually keeping his kids in school for 6 months here and the rest in Canada, because they're
we touched on that. They work together. Some of them work together.
The curriculum is like this.
Is this secondary school, like high school, or
no, it's actually elementary.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah, there's awesome schools in Barbados for sure. Antigua's got some high quality schools too.
You know what? The demand for that is exploding right now, and supply will follow. So there's a lot of islands that are attracting like wealthy expats that want to set their family up. That's who Antigua's really attracting. Wealthy families that want to live tax-free, live in paradise, don't want to be bothered. So they already have a pretty good school system. It's improving. They're building a giant private health clinic. It's like 50 or 60,000 square feet.
And they have the biggest research clinic for genome. What is it?
Stem cells.
Stem cells. Yeah, Antigua's a huge leading country.
Worldwide for that stuff.
Look up if you're watching. We're not gonna get into that on this, but look up stem cell research and all that. It's incredible what you will find on that, and being able to prolong your life and just look younger, that sort of thing. Healthcare. How does that work? If you're giving up, I know that's certainly. People that are later in life, that's certainly a concern for some people. How does that work? We've got as much as people like to complain, it's pretty darn good in Canada, the system that we have compared to other countries, and it's free in a lot of cases. So how do they benefit from that still while they're living in Antigua, let's say, or Barbados, or do they benefit from that, or they have to give it all up? Yeah,
some Canadians don't want to hear this, but Canada's healthcare is rated as like the best, or one of the top, for sure top 10, but top 5 in the world. And it's because it's accessible to everyone. It's high quality. Maybe wait times are higher, but they're not higher than other free systems. So yeah, Canada's, let's say the gold standard. But if you're looking at private healthcare, Cayman is actually exploding as a place for destination, healthcare. There's a word for it. It's escaping me, but private healthcare. People coming to do, surgery that don't want to wait in line. Right. People that want really high quality care, and maybe after their care want to relax for a few weeks.
That is one of the problems with the Canadian one, is that you're waiting for everything.
You can't skip the line.
Because it's a sick care. It's designed
to sick care
once you're already sick.
Right.
Private healthcare is geared more towards preventative.
people with money in Canada can't skip the line, and that frustrates people with money. So a lot of them will look for other options. So Cayman's very popular. I think healthcare is underdeveloped in a lot of these islands, but like education, as more expats, more wealthy family move to these places like Turks and Caicos, Barbados, Antigua, you're going to see more and more clinics pop up. So I'd say right now, if you're looking for great healthcare, let's say you're retiring and you're wealthy and you want to live in the Caribbean, Cayman is probably one of the better options. Bahamas is another popular choice. It has good healthcare. Barbados has a few private clinics, Antigua, but yeah, I've heard that it's still developing. But that whole landscape is going to be transformed over the next 10 years.
Oh yeah.
And the
technology improvements are insane.
Yeah, technology improvements. They're building clinics. Doctors, even doctors are going to be able to start working remotely, right? And like, well, for sure, psychologists and professions where you don't actually have to be on site. But even GPs, you're seeing doing virtual clinics. So it's all of that's changing, and I think the Caribbean will really benefit from those changes.
So do you still have healthcare within Canada when you go back?
No. So as a non-resident of Canada, you give up healthcare. You give up a few other things. So I have private health insurance. As a citizen of Antigua, I do have free healthcare in Antigua, which is nice. But for certain procedures or certain things, I'll still go to the private clinic. I'll still pay pay the deductible. But that wasn't at the top of my list. Just age. I'm healthy. I'm fit. So it just wasn't a factor for me right now. But yeah, I have parents and they always ask about that, and I'm excited for Antigua to have a great private clinic. So if my father and mother visit or family members that have health problems, there's somewhere to go if there's a problem. That is important for me for sure.
Yeah, so. Cool. Okay, I think we've got through a lot of the main topics here. Definitely want to encourage people to reach out to Dan. How do they get in touch with you if they want to learn more about how to do this stuff? Maybe they want to get some information from you. I know you're capable and willing to do some one-on-one talk maybe for some of these people. What can we offer them to get them more engaged with this stuff and go farther than what we've talked about here today?
Yeah, so anyone on the call, anyone live today, I'm happy to offer a free consultation, half an hour. We can get on Zoom and really just shoot the shit. I'll learn a little bit more about you, a little bit more about your investing goals, and what you're looking to do. Are you looking to buy something here? Are you looking to relocate? Happy to go through that. I'm pretty easy to find. I'm on most social media platforms, but I use LinkedIn a lot. So you can hit me up on LinkedIn. I've got a profile on there, or just visit my website, www.danmerriam.com, and you can message me on there.
Awesome. So definitely go do that. Is there anything that they need to have in place before doing that? Like, is there anything that would disqualify them from even exploring this, or is it something they can set up and put in action relatively soon? Is there a certain income bracket or certain things like that they just wouldn't qualify for?
Yeah,
for doing this?
Most investors we're working with are accredited in Canada, which usually means 5 million net worth, or income above 250,000 combined per year. Honestly, I'm open to talking to anyone that has interest in the Caribbean and wants to invest down here. But yeah, I think intent, someone that's looking to buy something here, looking to invest, wants to learn a little bit more about leaving Canada, some of the tax implications or benefits of doing that. I'm open to sharing my knowledge.
Cool. And I know Dan's sold off some stuff in Canada in order to expedite some of this process. So there's things you can help with on that too. So definitely reach out to him. Want to encourage you to do that and learn more. He's a great resource for all that stuff. Thanks, Kate. Great resource. I'm getting the sun's getting to us.
We're
now,
getting roasted here. Oh yeah.
So that ocean's calling us. There's a cold Banks beer or something maybe somewhere.
I hope so. I need one of those fish sandwiches ASAP.
A couple of fish cutters here.
Fish
cutters here are incredible in Barbados if you're ever here. Cuz or the Caboose, great spots. I think we're gonna get on with it here. So thanks everyone for joining. Hopefully you got some value out of this, and share it with others. If you know there's other people out there, share it with your spouse. Sometimes this is better to come from guys like us rather than you. If you really want to push something to happen down here. Sometimes spouses kind of opposites attract, and they aren't always on the same page, right, Kate?
No.
So share it around. Let us know how we can help, and looking forward to chatting with you guys more. Thanks.
All right.